Initial preparations for the lift include a team briefing and discussion of the work ahead. The boiler is of course empty but still weighs around 5 tonnes. Slings must then be attached to a central section of the boiler in order to ensure it is balanced and safe to lift. This work is completed by a slinger with advice from the crane driver as necessary. The craning crew then carefully manoeuvre the boiler using hand signals to lift, lower and slew the jib. Guide ropes must also be attached to ensure that the boiler load is fully under control once off the wagon. Only suitably experienced volunteers may undertake this role, as it is difficult and dangerous and sometimes requires a great deal of experience to understand how the boiler may behave once lifted. The first part of the operation was to lower the boiler carefully onto the ashpan. Locating the relevant pegs in drilled holes within the ashpan was a delicate task. The chassis was now ready to be shunted into place below the boiler. This was completed once the boiler had been craned to one side. Finally, the most important and skillful element of the lift was completed, placing the boiler back into the frames. This requires careful coordination of all volunteers involved and was successfully achieved as the boiler slid into place back in the frames it had vacated 4 years previously. Once in position, bolt holes and fixing angles were aligned, and a senior engineer looked over the project to ensure all was well. This whole operation had taken approximately 1.5 hours to complete. Soon after the boiler lift, pipe work and fittings were completed in readiness for the steam test. As previously mentioned, the boiler inspector would need to visit, but he was happy to do a single inspection once in the frames, rather than making 2 visits as initially envisaged. As pressure slowly built in the boiler, pipes were checked and other adjustments made. Steam was slow to appear on the pressure gauge, so compressed air was applied to the top of the chimney to increase the draft, and the tubes were even swept out. Soon afterward, pressure rose past the 100 psi mark, and the inspector gave the go-ahead to raise steam to the full 160 psi working pressure of the locomotive. As steam began to wisp from the safety valves, they were carefully adjusted to release at exactly the right pressure. Once the inspector had satisfied himself that all was well, the locomotive was then issued with a new 10-year ticket, and the final preparations for her return to steam would now be made.